Emotional intimacy is vulnerable, and we need to take care of it if we want it to persist in our relationships. In this video, I will explain how and why we sometimes unconsciously but actively destroy emotional intimacy, which leaves us feeling lonely, and how to change that. Hey everyone, this is Becoming an Expert at Self-Leadership, and I'm Maika, a psychologist. And a question that I have received frequently whenever I've posted about similar topics is, how can I create meaningful connections to others? How can I build emotional intimacy? And these are really important questions because we are deeply social creatures. We need emotional intimacy to feel alive and fulfilled. In fact, loneliness has similar effects on our odds of dying early as smoking and excessive drinking do. In this video, I would like to answer these questions by looking at things we do that stand in the way of emotional intimacy and connection, distancing strategies and defense mechanisms we use that interrupt connection and push others away, and how we can stop engaging in those behaviors. In relationships, we are always carefully balancing two values: connection or attachment, and autonomy or independence. It may sound like these two are contradictory, but they're not. We can live a life that fulfills our needs for both. Or we can also live a life that doesn't fulfill either of these needs, that leaves us feeling lonely and enmeshed or codependent at the same time. We all have our personal history with these two values. We've made experiences that have shaped us in ways that make one or the other or both easier or harder for us. When someone finds it difficult to balance these two values in their life, they will use distancing strategies, or sometimes also called deactivating strategies, to push others away whenever they get too close and it feels like they're threatening that person's autonomy. And this is the behavior that stifles emotional intimacy. And if it's a pattern that repeats itself in a lot of situations with a lot of people, it's called an avoidant attachment style. But just because someone has that pattern also doesn't mean they won't change. Actually, 25% of people do change their attachment style within a time frame of 4 years. But I don't want to make this video so much about attachment styles and these categories that we may sort ourselves into. I'd like to ask you to reflect on these strategies more generally, because we can all use distancing strategies unconsciously or consciously without necessarily having an avoidant attachment style, but still these strategies place unnecessary burdens on our relationships and destroy emotional intimacy. So it's very helpful to be aware of them and be able to recognize them so that then we can think about why we're doing that and if we want to act differently in the future. I'll read a list of common deactivating or distancing strategies to you. And while I read them, see which ones are familiar to you from other people in your life or because you use them yourself. Never really committing to a relationship, romantic or otherwise, somehow always having one foot out of the door. Starting fights, provoking someone. Everything's going well, everything's peaceful, but there's this threat of autonomy in the air for that person. So they provoke someone to create some friction and distance. Keeping a critical distance, zooming in on the other person's flaws to depreciate them. This is also something that comes up spontaneously and isn't motivated by wanting to work on a relationship, but it's motivated by wanting to create distance. misinterpreting situations and intentions, being very quick to assume that someone else is antagonistic or threatening. When ending a friendship or relationship, to rationalize that decision with facts that are far-fetched or have been known from the beginning, like an age gap. Flirting with other people or talking about what a much better friend someone else is. Not listening when someone is talking. Not taking on the empathetic perspective of trying to understand what someone is saying. Not sharing details about oneself, being secretive. Not sharing anything about one's past or thoughts for the future. Not committing to gatherings and get-togethers. Giving that feedback if you will show up the day before and not earlier because it feels threatening to your autonomy to say that in 3 months I'll be there. Clinging to and idealizing fantasy connections, feeling like this influencer would be the best of friends, or that my best romantic partner is somewhere out there and always unattainable in the past, in the future, or someone who is married. Thinking of cutting off a connection to someone because of a minor quirk, like that person's way of eating or the clothes they wear. Avoiding physical closeness, for example, walking ahead of the group on a hike. Avoiding contact by fleeing into work, the internet, gaming. Setting strong and rigid boundaries very early on. Feeling threatened very quickly and then putting up boundaries that are very strong and very rigid right away. These deactivating and distancing strategies have a purpose: protection. Protection from getting hurt, from getting broken up with, from that subjectively felt confinement of being connected to someone. Protection from losing independence, protection from being dependent on someone. In short, these strategies aim at soothing the anxiety this person feels about connection and attachment. The anxiety or tension that someone feels when they're threatened by connection comes from the way this person interprets what's going on in that relationship. And our interpretations are guided by our beliefs. And beliefs that fuel these distancing strategies that destroy emotional intimacy are beliefs like others aren't trustworthy, others weigh me down, people are too needy when they're in a relationship, I am solely responsible for another person's well-being once I'm connected to them. Looking down on dependence in any way. Feeling or believing that I am weak, I am unlovable, I am in an inferior position, I'm not allowed to be myself, I can't live my authentic life if I'm connected to someone, I can't set boundaries, I'm not allowed to say no, I'll get rejected anyway. Every part of this pattern, the anxiety, the interpretations and thought patterns, beliefs that devalue connection, form based on our past experiences. They form in times of someone's life when distancing strategies were necessary or somehow made sense. For example, when someone is part of an enmeshed family or in an enmeshed relationship in which they weren't given the space to exist as an individual, in which they weren't given the space to influence the family or relationship, in which their need for autonomy wasn't met and they had to fight for every inch of it. These are the times in someone's life that will teach the person to use distancing strategies to build connection devaluing beliefs and put up walls of protection to protect their authenticity and autonomy. If we want to stop destroying emotional intimacy, we need to recognize these patterns. We need to recognize whenever we are engaging in distancing strategies, we need to recognize the emotions, interpretations, and beliefs behind that, and see that this whole pattern is something from our past, from a time where it was necessary, but now we are either in a new relationship or in a new family, in a new system where that's not necessary anymore, or we can influence it in a way and change it so that it doesn't become necessary anymore, or we can look for friends and partners where distancing strategies aren't necessary because we don't have to fight for every inch of our autonomy. And there's a healthy dynamic of connection and autonomy in that relationship. So recognize the pattern whenever you fall into it and know that you don't need it anymore. You can stop this precautious fight for your autonomy. And to reform your beliefs about relationships and connection, to know that you can be connected and autonomous in the same life, and that a healthy relationship doesn't require you to overconform and adapt and tiptoe around someone else. A healthy relationship will allow you to be who you are and have room for you as you. What's confining isn't connection. What's confining are our beliefs about connection. And when we gain a healthy understanding what it means to be in a relationship or connected to someone, it won't be threatening anymore. And then we are internally ready for emotional intimacy because the thought of being connected to someone or spending time with someone won't trigger anxiety or stress and tension in us anymore. And we can support our process of opening up to emotional intimacy by inverting as many of the distancing strategies as possible. So instead of pushing others away, creating space for ourselves by first of all recognizing whenever we have the need to be separate and autonomous, to not feel guilty about that. It's a completely natural need. Everyone has it to different degrees, sure, but it's totally normal to have that need. And it doesn't threaten relationships at all if we relate to it and express it in a way that isn't destructive for emotional intimacy, by openly communicating it. And when we get good at recognizing our need for space and separateness and communicating it, then distancing strategies which are ineffective are not necessary anymore. Inverting these distancing strategies can also mean that instead of focusing on other people's flaws, whenever you notice that your mind is going back to those thought patterns, to consciously think about why you're grateful to have that person in your life. And instead of being overly focused on our own perspective and our own needs, to be empathetic to those important people in your life and understand their perspective, and to do something that supports the relationship and them, invest into the relationship. It can also mean to stop these go-to misinterpretations of assuming that others are threatening and secretly planning to sabotage you without there being any objective sign for that, and to trust that they do have your best interest in mind. we don't have to be lonely behind our walls. At some point in our past, they had a purpose, but now that purpose is obsolete. Now we can let them go and relish the flavor that only shared happiness and connection with others can bring into our lives. I hope you got something from the time you've invested into watching this video, and that it is one of the stepping stones to more emotional intimacy for you. If this is the first video that you're watching on this channel, consider subscribing so you can watch more videos like this. And if there's anything you'd like me to talk about, let me know about that in the comment section. Till next time, take care, and remember, it's possible to experience both connection and autonomy in life. They're not mutually exclusive.